Hello, listeners and fellow book lovers. Welcome to The Book Snug, a bi-weekly conversational podcast about books and the reading life. My name is Julia.
And my name is Stephany.
We're a mother and daughter who love reading and talking about books, the ones we adore and the ones we don't. We're delighted you're here, so grab your favorite hot drink or ice-cold beverage and settle in for another cozy bookish chat.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Mom.
What do you have there in your mug?
I am drinking a chai tea.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking hot cinnamon spice tea by Harney and Sons.
Mm-hmm.
It's the perfect tea for this time of
Yeah.
year. Yeah, very spicy, has all the fall feels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yum.
Speaking of fall, it is the end of November.
Mm-hmm.
We are even past Thanksgiving now.
Mm-hmm.
So for most people, they are heading
to get their Christmas tree.
Yeah. Full speed into Christmas.
There are several people where we live where Christmas lights have been up for 2 weeks already.
We have some neighbors who pretty much took down their Halloween decorations and put up their Christmas decorations.
My in-laws live right beside somebody who works at Christmas Tree Farm or the Christmas Tree Shop.
Christmas Tree Hill?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
But their yard, Christmas threw up one. So I'm pretty sure in the next day or two, all of the music will start playing out of those figures.
All decorations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love all that stuff, but I'm not quite ready to jump into it just yet. I still want to savor the last little bit of fall. I mean, technically, fall is going to be around until the third week in December. So I thought that we could just spend a little bit of time talking about some books that still feel like fall before we jump headlong into the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, kind of hitting all the highlights of what fall is here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think about fall, I think about a couple different things. I think about the back to school season, which would be mostly the September-ish time of fall. And then, of course, we have Halloween, which is all spooky, scary, creepy. Or if you aren't really into the scary stuff, maybe you're into spoopy Halloween, which is a little teeny bit creepy, but nothing that's going to give you nightmares.
Right, or even some gothic themes in there, too.
Yeah. And then finally, the last full month of fall is the thankful or grateful season in the United States, where we celebrate Thanksgiving and reflect on all of the blessings that we experience every year. So you and I decided that we would like to talk about a few books that address some of these themes. And we each chose a book for a setting based in school, a setting that's creepy or gothic. And then we each picked a book that just has cozy autumnal vibes. So, Julia, let's dive right in. What book did you choose for a school theme or a school setting, or a book that addresses the school experience?
Yeah, so the book that I picked, I wanted to pick so many other books because it's a standard answer once you read this series. But I just felt totally remiss if I didn't.
If you didn't bring it up.
Yeah. And that is the Harry Potter series. Now, we are in America. I went to public American school. I don't know what it is to go to a boarding school or an English boarding school or anything like that.
School.
Yeah. Let alone a magic boarding school. So I think the first 3 books of this series perfectly encapsulate that idea of what that is like. Now, for those of you that have never read Harry Potter or don't know any of the story, Harry is going to this English school, magic school set in the English countryside.
Called Hogwarts.
Hogwarts, yes, where he's learning to do magic and all that comes with. Now, there are some darker themes to this story. So by the end of the series, books 4, 5, and 6, I would kind of say the focus is less on the school and more on what else is going on.
Right. The battle between good and evil really is what it comes down to.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I think about this series in particular, I want the first 3 books. Now, I love the 4th book. I love the 5th book. But when I want back to school, or I want nostalgia, or I want that feeling, I want the first three, which is Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah, depending on where in the world you live.
Yes.
Yes.
Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban. And those three, I mean, I like the first and the third specifically for this time of year. The first one because it's that spoopy, you know, getting to know Hogwarts and the magic and all of that.
Making new friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to find your way in school.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a troll that happens in the first one and everything. Yeah. And then the third book has werewolves and animal shapeshifters. And so there's more of a kind of a spookier vibe to that one. But this one is just great for school because, you know, you're seeing Harry get established in Hogwarts and what the studies look like. And so you're getting this glimpse of these magical studies of herbology and history of magic and
learning to make spells.
Transfiguration.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and you're actually in the classroom watching them blow each other up.
Right.
And yeah.
It's so much fun. But again, I like those three because they're it's not as serious yet for the hippie stuff, whereas the rest of the series is much more so. Right.
Lower stakes, more focus on friendship development and just being at school.
Harry's 11 at the beginning of the series, so he's quite young. So you're kind of seeing as he's maturing, as he's getting to know himself, as he's settling into who he is, especially because he comes from such a horrible childhood.
Yes.
And then you can kind of see him grow up. So it's school, but then it's also this life progression as well.
Yeah. Very fun. I agree. Yeah. I support your decision 100% to bring Harry Potter to the show.
I think it needed to make an appearance at some point.
I'm pretty sure he's going to come back over
and
over
again. Definitely. What's your pick for this one, Mom?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different route, and I am bringing a book that definitely has a school theme to it, but it is also a spooky, creepy kind of book. So I'm getting a 2-for-1 with this one, but I'm putting it squarely in the school-themed book category. And that is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James.
This one is so good.
This book is a dual timeline book. One of the timelines happens, I think, in the 1950s. And the second timeline is mostly present day. It's 2014. And both timelines revolve around this school called Idlewild, which I have such a hard time pronouncing. I don't know why. The historical timeline is focused on 4 girls who attend this school. They are friends, and one of the girls goes missing. And that storyline focuses on what happened to her. The current timeline follows a journalist whose sister is found dead on the premises of this school property, but the school is no longer running. It's totally deteriorating, falling apart. That's really the only thing that pulls both storylines together is the setting of this school. But why I'm choosing it for this category of a school-themed book is the fact that these 4 girls are living at this boarding school and just their experiences there. Now, their experiences are not like Harry Potter's.
Not in any way.
Because the school is haunted.
Yes.
And it's haunted by a pretty malevolent spirit. And each girl has a different haunting experience in this school because the spirit can be very specific in how I'm going to say she scares people.
Yeah.
So it is a very creepy book. The girls that are in this school are pretty much placed here because people don't know what to do with them. They either don't want the girls or they don't know how to handle
their mental health issues.
Right, or a particular personality trait.
Yeah.
So not only do the girls feel unloved and unwanted, they feel kind of like they're prisoners at this school. So it's a very specific type of school setting. Yeah. Kind of like how I felt in high school.
It's kind of dramatic, Mom.
I'm just joking. Yeah. But anyway, it's a great book. If you are interested in more of a truly scary vibe,
Yeah.
with a school-related theme, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
Simone St. James is a master of creepy, like, atmosphere or vibes, and she writes a compelling story.
Yeah.
These are both mysteries, so it's 2 separate mysteries that you're following in the book, and you get satisfying endings to both of them.
Yeah.
So again, highly recommend it. The
Yeah.
Bergen Girls by Simone St. James.
Yes, she is. That book is so good.
It is. It's very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I read one of the others of hers, Sundown Motel, which is definitely better if you're looking for spookier,
Yeah.
like shouldn't read at night,
Yeah.
will kind of make you all unsettled. That one's really good, but this one is definitely is great for this prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those books with the dual timelines where you're really interested in both.
Yeah.
In my Goodreads little recap that I do private recaps. They're not open to the public. I put that I really like the historical timeline the best, but I liked both of them.
Yeah.
So I wasn't disappointed when I was spending time in the current day.
Right. Definitely both sides of the story. I think Simone St. James does a good job of thinking of all of the details and thinking of how to pull everything together.
Yeah.
I've definitely read a book, well, the one that I'm thinking of, where it is a dual timeline, and the modern day timeline was not nearly as thought out or detailed, or it felt kind of like an afterthought to what the timeline back in history was.
And then you just think, I just write a book about that part. That's all I really want to read about.
Yeah. But this one, I highly recommend.
Yeah,
it's really
it delivers on all fronts.
And it reads really fast.
Yes.
It's not something where you need to think about things. You just, you read.
And you want to know what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep, very good. So then the next theme that we picked for this one was creepy or gothic, kind of thinking about those Halloween vibes.
Yes.
So which one did you pick for this category, Mom?
I am going to go in a little bit different direction even than we've done so far, and I'm going to pick a middle grade book called The Night Gardener by Jonathan Auxier. I love Jonathan Auxier's writing. I'm an adult and I love reading his middle grade books. He writes with a Charles Dickens type of, I don't want to use the word vibe again.
It's a kind of feel, or
he has a Charles Dickens style of writing. And there's always a little bit or a lot of magic involved in his writing. And this story, The Night Gardener, is full on scary, which is great. If I was a middle grader, I would have loved reading this book at the time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it as an adult. So it pretty much crosses all generations as far as enjoyment level. A brief synopsis is that you have a brother and a sister. They are Irish, and they are recently orphaned. The sister's name is Molly. She's the older sibling, and she feels a responsibility to make sure that she and her brother Kip are taken care of. And she procures jobs for them in this mansion in the middle of the woods, and the woods are called the Sour Woods. So you know right away it's going to be a bad place. They arrive at this house. It's crumbling, falling apart at the seams. The grounds are overgrown. And when they meet the family, something's not right. The family is pale. They look like they're wasting away. They all act weird. So Molly and Kip settle in, and Kip starts to notice this stranger that visits the garden at nighttime. And then Molly realizes he's not just visiting the garden, he's coming into the house, because she wakes up one morning and she sees these big muddy boot prints beside her bed.
I don't like that.
And the rest of the story is figuring out what is going on with this family. Who is this stranger that's appearing at night? And then there is something very evil about the house itself. And the plot just keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up. There's this sense of dread and tension. There's this action-packed climax to the story. And then, of course, you have this neatly wrapped ending because it's a middle grade book. So you get all the spooky, scary feelings, but you know you're not going to be stuck with this ambiguous ending, which you often get with adult horror.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it. It is a great ride. Molly and Kip are heroes. They're just incredible. They are characters that you love and you can really get behind. Kip is disabled. He uses a crutch. And so that's even extra wonderful that he is able to be so heroic and do such great things in this book. So that is The Night Gardener by Jonathan Auxier. And Julia, because you like Gothic so much, I think that you would love this book. For one thing, it happens mostly at night. So it is truly dark. It's dark most of the time. The woods are evil. It's just so much fun.
Yeah. It sounds like fun, which is so weird to say about a scary book, but it does sound like one that I would enjoy definitely around October. And yeah. No, it sounds good.
And I listened to it the first time I experienced it, and I think that's a great way. It's a great audiobook. I failed to look up the narrator, but they do a great job, and I would highly recommend it.
Okay, it's going on my TBR then for next fall.
What about you? What's your pick for spooky, scary vibes?
So the book I've picked is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
A classic.
Yes. I don't know why it took me so long to read this book, but I would consider it a complement or a contemporary to Jane Eyre. They have very similar themes, kind of almost written in similar trajectories.
Yes.
So if you've liked Jane Eyre, if you don't want to read Jane Eyre because whatever reason, I would recommend this one. Definitely Gothic. So our main character is a young woman. You never know her name, so I'm not being purposefully shielded by not saying her name. I legit don't know it. But she is rather naive and rather young, meets and quickly falls in love and very quickly gets married to Maxim de Winter, who is a much older man from high society in England. And when I mean high society, like he has a full-on mansion, like estate house that he lives in.
Lots of servants.
Yes. Moves in high society circles. Yes. And that's not how our dear young doe-eyed
protagonist has lived.
Yes, not at all. But they get married and they go back to this house, which is Manderley. Beautiful house, beautiful setting. Now it doesn't take place in the fall because there are descriptions of like rhododendrons and pretty flowers and things like that. Things that would not be common for the fall, especially in that place of the world. But the house sits kind of, I envisioned it up on a little hill because it's near a cove. So you get the water and the path down to the water, and it's kind of isolated. There's no other homes kind of near it. Anyway, as our young woman is navigating what it means to be married, she's also navigating what it means to suddenly manage a home in high society. So you get all the insecurity wrapped within that. But then you also learn that Maxim, this is not his first marriage, and that his first wife died within the past year or so. And nobody talks about it. There's this kind of feeling of what happened, what's going on.
Suspicious circumstances.
Everybody loves Rebecca. So then our young woman feels like she needs to start to emulate her to be, the insecurity of, well, then I'll be a good wife or whatever. So this story kind of takes on, you begin to ask, is this a ghost story? Is it not? Rebecca's presence, Rebecca, the first wife, her presence is very tangible in the house.
It is. Very tangible.
And so you're constantly wondering, like, what happened? Do we like Rebecca? Do we not like Rebecca? I think Daphne does a really good job of writing this tension, the obsession, the paranoia. Fabulously done. I will say, though, that if you've watched the most recent movie with Lily James and Armie Hammer, fine movie on its own, but I'm going to recommend that you read the book because the endings are different. Very different.
And I feel like the movie did not have the gothic quality to the extent that the book did. It wasn't as dark. When I think about it visually, it felt a lot lighter and just not as gothic as I would say.
Yeah, I think that the movie did not do as good of a job of capturing the obsession.
Yeah.
or the paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were some instances where it was there, but it was kind of like, oh, hi, you're supposed to be obsessed with this, or oh, hi, this is what's going on, instead of feeling it build as you're reading the story.
Yeah.
I read this book. It took me a couple months to read it last year, and that's just because I had other stuff going on.
Right.
But I have very distinct memories of reading it around a campfire in the middle of the woods, which is the perfect place to read it.
Yeah.
My copy is also one that I got from an antique store. So as you're opening it, the pages are all browned and crinkly, and so it
has that smell.
Yeah, a perfect experience to read this book.
Yeah.
I will admit, I read it during a snow day in college one day and inadvertently spilled hot tea all over it and myself. So now there's tea-stained pages in it, but it's the perfect story. It's short, it reads fast, it reads quickly, really great with those gothic vibes and making you look over your shoulder a little bit.
Yeah.
So highly recommend.
When you compared it to Jane Eyre, I don't think I've ever done that before, but I think it's an excellent comparison. And I would say for people who don't care for the relationship between Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester because it's a little ick for them.
Yeah.
I think the relationship between Maxim and our protagonist is more palatable.
Yes. As things move throughout the story.
Yes. You don't get this sense that there are some really bad underlying issues in that relationship as much as you do with Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't care for the relationship between Maxim de Winter and our young woman, our protagonist, our main character, at the beginning, because I think it felt too quickly that you weren't very aware of his affections on the side of things.
Right, and they didn't know each other.
No.
Yeah.
Not one bit.
Yeah.
But as the book goes on and as things happen and towards the end, things settle much, much better.
Okay.
So that's my pick for creepy, gothic, October-y feeling things.
Yeah. I feel like I could have picked 100 books
for
that.
Oh, so could I.
Yeah. I actually love that category. Not full on horror, but just very creepy, spine tingly, hairs on the back of your neck standing up.
No, you shouldn't read it at night.
Right, yeah.
Or before bed, yeah.
The last category of fall book that we're going to talk about is just a book that has an autumnal setting or gives you all the feels for autumn, whether it's the actual months of autumn or where the characters are they staying in a cabin with a fireplace and you can hear the wind outside and it's raining or whatever. So what book are you going to pick to fit that broad category?
Yeah. The one that I've picked it's a long title, The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making.
That is a very long title.
By Catherynne and Valente. Yeah. This is a whimsical, wild, nonsensical ride of just fun. I would compare it to Wizard of Oz meets Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison.
Yeah. A synopsis is, I feel like, it's a little tricky to do, but our main character, September, she's a young girl.
Even her name is Fall.
I know, yeah. She's young, and I would think she's around the same age as Alice in Alice in Wonderland. Kind of that same...
Yeah, 10, 11.
Yeah, gets swept into Fairyland. She has a whole host of really fun characters that become her friends. There's a wyvern, which is like a dragon.
Yeah.
But this wyvern is a product of a wyvern and a library, so his name is really fun. There's something called the Green Wind, who manifests as a little green man.
Yes.
There's a boy that she finds that becomes part of this entourage. And she's in Fairyland and she's exploring, and suddenly she gets sent on a quest to grab a silver spoon for the Marquis.
Yes.
And so it's the journey through Fairyland to find said silver spoon. And so you discover all of these little places within Fairyland. The beach that she lands on in Fairyland is just full of gold objects, and that's the sand.
Yes.
There's a place where she has to get a bath, and so it's just a land of like baths and whatever. where they scrub her, but they also scrub her luck and her courage. The main capital of Fairyland itself, is just made of fabric.
Yes.
So many other places. But on her journey, she lands in a place called October, right? I think it's Octoberland. October. Either way, this is a place that it's always fall. It's always autumn. So the leaves are always golden. They're always changing colors. The air is crisp. The
smell
everything.
Of apple. Yeah.
Yeah. And she spent some time there. I think it's while she's passing through a forest for whatever purpose. So you have a true section of the book where it is just the descriptions of fall and October and
perfectly fall.
Yes. I believe it's chapter 11, and I only know that because I looked it up for this.
Yeah.
But the intro of that chapter, there's a beautiful paragraph description of fall. So while the entire book is not set in the fall, setting or atmosphere or whatever, that section of the book is perfect for that setting, but it's also a really cozy book to curl up with as the weather gets colder, because it's just fun. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
And the writing, as imaginative as it is, it's the kind of imaginative writing where you don't feel like that the author's not unhinged. The imaginative writing is also really steeped in wisdom, because there are sentences throughout the book where you're like, oh, that's a really profound idea, or that's a really, really good thought. So like when she has to get her bath of scrub your courage and scrub your luck, as silly as that sounds, I really resonated with that idea, because before you go in to do something big, refresh your luck, refresh your courage, get yourself all right back together. Yeah. So it's Catherynne is writing this story in a way that's also like, here are some ideas for you to think about.
Yeah.
This book is a series. I'm not going to read the series, but definitely really enjoyed this first one.
Yeah, and the first book feels complete. When you get to the end of it, you don't feel like you need to keep reading to find out what the rest of the story is.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it hints for books to come, but it's not like it doesn't leave on a cliffhanger. It doesn't leave anything unfinished. It ties up really nicely.
And it's also middle grade.
Yeah. With cute little illustrations in it and everything.
Lots of great middle grade books to read as an adult. I read middle grade a lot.
Mm-hmm. What book did you pick for this one?
I'm bringing to the show a book that I just recently finished reading, and it's perfect for this particular type of fall book, and it is called The City Baker's Guide to Country Living. It's written by Louise Miller, and I would characterize this book, or I would call this book chick lit, if that is even a real term anymore. It's literature, I guess, that's written specifically for women. And the reason I'm going to say that it falls in this category is because it follows a woman in her early 30s. She's a pastry chef, and she's good at her job. She's been awarded some special recognition for some of the types of desserts she's put together. And she works in a very exclusive club in Boston. And on the night of a special celebration, like an anniversary celebration for the club, she pretty much burns it down with a baked Alaska.
So awful.
So she runs away to her best friend's house.
Very normal thing to do.
Right. Because she doesn't have any family, and her best friend is pretty much her closest relation. And her friend lives in this little town in Vermont called Guthrie. And because the club has to be remodeled since there was that much damage, she doesn't really have any work to do anyway, so she gets a job at this little inn called the Sugar Maple Inn. And she makes pastry for the guests there. And this all happens in September, and you're following, the story is a year long, and then even a little bit more than that, a year long tale. But for the first half of the book, you're with her in Vermont in the fall. She lives in a little sugar shack in the middle of an apple orchard. There's forest all around. The leaves are changing. It's getting chilly. She has a little wood stove in her house. And then because she's a baker, there is so much food description, and it's just wonderful. You just feel really cozy reading it. The main protagonist, I think her name is Olivia. She makes some bad decisions, and the Baked Alaska is not one of them. That was an accident. But while she was at the club, she was having an affair with the president, who is married, has kids. And when she goes to Vermont, she starts evaluating her life and realizing some of the bad decisions she's made. She makes a couple bad decisions when she's in Guthrie, too. But the reason I really like this book is, even with the bad decisions she made, in the consequences part of it, she makes really good decisions, so that when you're following the arc of her story, you're really satisfied with where she ends up in the end. So I highly recommend it, even just for the fall feeling of it. There's a gorgeous Thanksgiving scene in here where a big family is getting together, and there's all this description about the food prep and sitting down and eating together and what people do after. And it feels like Thanksgivings that we have, and I just really enjoyed it. It's just a good story about one person's life. There is a bit of a romance in here, but it is not the main theme of the book. And there's one paragraph, I'm just going to put a warning here. There's one paragraph where the bedroom door is a little bit open. So you know what's going on in the bedroom. There's not a lot of description, but it definitely is not closed door. Things do happen in the book. It's not happening off scene, like off stage. So just a little bit of a warning for listeners who don't really like having sexy time described in their book. You can skip that one paragraph. It's really easy. But anyway, it's more just a story of growing, maturing, friendships, being part of a community. It's really, it's great. It's a great book.
Yeah. It sounds wholesome.
It is. It really is wholesome. It's just good.
Yeah.
And the author is a pastry chef, and she does play the banjo. And the main character in the book is a pastry chef and plays the banjo. So you can tell that the author has a lot of knowledge and interest in the things she's writing about. So
no, that sounds fun. It sounds cozy. As you were talking about it, only because I finished the show this year, it just reminded me a lot of the Gilmore Girls, of this cozy place in New England set around the fall. Totally wholesome.
There probably is a lot of connections between the two. I know nobody's going to believe this, but I've never watched the Gilmore Girls, sat down and watched a show. I've seen scenes before. Sure. But I have a feeling that there are probably a lot of similar connections.
Yeah. And it just sounds wholesome. And I think sometimes, especially in the fall, if I'm not reading my gothic spooky stuff, I want wholesome. So like this year I reread the first Harry Potter because I wanted wholesome spoopy. And so I think that would be a really nice compliment to somebody who wants to read Rebecca but also doesn't want to be scared to death. They're like the Broken Girls but doesn't want to read.
Although the Broken Girls, that walks a line. It does. You may not want to read that in bed at night.
No, but then just read this one after.
Right, yeah. And this is a quick read. I started it on a Saturday evening and finished it on Sunday. I wasn't doing anything. I had no plan, so I could just sit down and read. Right. But it read very fast. So if you're just looking for a quick, comfy read, I would definitely suggest this one. Yeah. Well, I think we covered a lot of territory. I think
we did.
And talked about some really great books that offer some great reading experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Well, then to tie out here at the end, we're just going to ask our questions about our current reading life, if we will. So then, Mom, what have you just finished?
Well, I did mention that I was reading West with Giraffes in our last episode, and I did finish that up and really, really enjoyed it. Very moving, fun read that kind of sent me down some rabbit holes. You can actually find images of the real giraffes as they were traveling across country. So that was fun to see how they put the truck together and fit the giraffes in. And then I decided to read another book about the Dust Bowl because West with Giraffes is based during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression time. And the main protagonist grows up in the Texas Panhandle during the Dust Bowl. So his whole life was Dust Bowl experience. Okay. So I read Out of the Dust by Karen Hess, which is a Newbery Award winner, about a young girl who grows up in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. It's written in verse. It's a beautiful, short novel. I understand why it got the Newbery. And I read that in a night. It took me an hour, hour and a half maybe. And then I read City Baker's Guide to Country Living, which I already talked about. What about you?
So I haven't finished any physical books since we last chatted. However, I did recently remember that I was listening to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Now, this has taken me the entire year to listen to because I don't do audiobooks, so I tend to forget that I'm listening to them. But I did just finish that this week.
Just the original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or the whole
No, just
omnibus?
The first one.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what that first one is called, but
I think it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah. And that one was narrated by Stephen Fry.
Yes.
So it was really enjoyable. And that's a really nonsensical, ridiculous story with silly writing, but just an absolute hoot. Yeah. And as I am reading The Historian right now, which is serious and heavy and dark, it was just really amusing to A, remember I was listening to the story, and then B, to listen to it and then go home and then read his story because of just the juxtaposition of ridiculousness in the middle of the galaxy with just craziness happening to
serious
stuff.
Spooky. Yeah.
So that's what I just finished.
Okay. So what are you currently reading?
Yeah. The Historian.
Oh, big surprise.
Woo!
Yeah.
By Elizabeth Kostova. I'm further in it than I was the last time we talked.
That's good. Progress is good.
Definitely. But this is 600 pages, so it is quite a lot to try to get through while I'm working a full-time job and doing everything else. I'm definitely at the part in the book now where things are getting a little bit spookier, so I'm limited to not reading it at night, which is when I have the time to read it.
Right.
I definitely do still want to try to get it done by the end of the month. That's quite a lot of heavy lifting to do.
Yeah.
But if not, I'll read it into December and then start my other books later. I am really enjoying this one so far. I am finding it to be a really interesting story. And so far here at the beginning, it's a trifold story. So much like Frankenstein, where there's a story within a story within a story. So it's a really cool layered storytelling effect.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
What are you currently reading?
I'm at an interesting place right now. I finished up the City Baker's Guide to Country Living, and then Thanksgiving rolled around, and I just got busy with work and the holiday. So I'm not physically reading anything. I was listening to The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Kowal. I think that's who wrote it.
Okay.
And I was enjoying it. It's a murder mystery in space based off of The Thin Man by Dashiell Hammett. But I had an issue with it, a little issue that just kept getting worse and worse and was actually detracting from my enjoyment of the story. And I got to the point where the mystery didn't mean enough for me to keep going with the issue. So I stopped reading it. I put it aside, and I felt fine with that. If you're curious, the issue I had was the author was hyper-focused on pronouns. So every time a person was introduced, their pronouns were said with them. And then whenever they were talking about them, the pronouns were brought into the conversation. I don't have issues with pronoun specification per se.
Right.
But when you're listening to an audiobook,
it gets clunky.
Very. And that becomes the focus. And then you get confused because you really don't. And the author used every pronoun under the sun. Like even some pronouns I never in my life heard before. And I just struggled with that. And it just completely distracted from the story. I liked the protagonists. I liked them together. The murder mystery was fine. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Yeah.
And the whole space thing was cool, but I just couldn't get past the pronoun confusion.
Right.
If I was reading it, it might have been better because I could have skimmed over those parts. But I just got to the point where I thought, I'm not even sure I care enough to pick up the print book.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, I put The Spare Man aside. It's a personal thing. I'm not making any kind of objective criticism of the book. It just, for me, was a problem.
Right. It was difficult to separate the writing from the story.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't get into the story because the pronoun thing kept taking me out of it again.
Yeah, it was clunky.
Yeah. So I just started Stephen King's Fairy Tale, and I just started it. So I can't even talk about it. I have no idea how it's going to play out, but I'm looking forward to it, and I'm doing that on audio as well.
Gotcha.
And because I just started it, I don't even know who the narrator is. So when we come back around again to check in on our reading, I'll have the narrator I can talk about too.
And is that, because I know Stephen King can write all sorts of stuff other than his scary stuff. So is that a true scary, or is it just another?
This is not scary.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure there are going to probably be scary parts.
Yeah.
Not hard scary, but just uncomfortable.
Sure.
This is more fantasy. And from what I understand, in the second part of the book, it gets pretty heavy into known fairy tales.
Oh, cool.
Because this is what's called a portal fantasy. So you have people in the real world, but they find a doorway into a fantasy world.
Sure.
And I think that's what's going to happen here.
Okay. No, that sounds cool.
Yeah. I do know there's an older gentleman. There's the main protagonist who's a teenage boy who I've already met. And I think there's also a dog. But I don't know how they all play out and get into this fairy tale kingdom. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. So then, if that's what you're just currently reading, what are you planning on afterwards?
I don't know.
Yeah.
The fairy tale book is long, so that's going to take me a little while. Especially if I don't do much walking, which I haven't been doing lately. I would like to pick up a book to read, either an ebook or a print book, but I don't know if I'm feeling Christmassy now. Do I want to pick up maybe a Christmas romance, or I really don't know what I want to do. I'm going to let my mood dictate, like I did with the City Baker's Guide, and I had a lot of luck with that.
Yeah.
So I have a ton of books. I have some library books. I have a ton of just regular books and ebooks that I own that I could pick up. So it'll just be a surprise.
Yeah.
How about you? Probably nothing. You're just going to stick with the historian.
Well, I am not somebody who, I don't like to stop a book and then read another and then come back. Yeah.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So ultimately, in my dream world, I would finish the historian before I move on to anything else. That being said, this year particularly, I've started this year to kind of romanticize my seasons. And that happened in the summer because I hate the summertime. But I knew that in order for me to get through it, I needed to find things I enjoyed about it. So I'm already thinking about how I'm going to romanticize my Christmas season. So I'm looking to find a really good audiobook of The Christmas Carol that I can listen to at night as I'm making cookies or as I'm getting ready for bed or whatever, because it's a short audiobook, so it'll be done in no time.
3.5 hours.
Yeah. And then I have the physical book of The Legend of Holly Claus by Brittany Ryan, which is this sweet middle grade story of Santa Claus's daughter. So it's sometime in the magical world where they all live, and then sometime in Victorian England around Christmas time, and really enjoyable. That's a book that I read during my childhood around Christmas time, and so it's coming back to that. So I would like to read that after the historian. I don't think that's going to happen, but those are the two that I'm looking at next: is The Christmas Carol to listen to, and then Holly Claus to read. Yeah. Yep.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, I feel like we've done the fall some justice today, and now we can close the book on autumn 2022, and we can look into the Christmas holiday and get all geared up for decorations and cookies and presents. And,
Yes, and the Christmas lights, which we bashed so hard at the beginning. Which really is one of the most magical parts of
it is
Christmas.
And it's free.
Yes,
you can walk around your neighborhood and look at everybody else's lights and get in the Christmas spirit.
Yep. So then tune in next time where we will be talking about
some good Christmas memories related to books
and reading.
Yeah. That's a wrap, dear listeners. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. You can continue today's conversation at the booksnug_podcast on Instagram and at the Booksnug podcast on Facebook. All of our episodes can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at our website, thebooksnugpodcast.buzzsprout.com, where show notes for every episode can also be found. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thebooksnugpodcast@gmail.com.
As C.S. Lewis, one of our favorite authors, so famously said, "You can never have a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me," and we wholeheartedly agree.